How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, this is one of them type of videos. Yes, it is. This is a very, very serious video. And this is one of them videos where I say, go get your shit. Go get your shit. And I have 3 videos to show. And out of those 3, I have a bonus. Now, anytime I have a bonus video, it is always powerful, enlightening, eye-opening. Ooh wee, like that, like that. So before I get started, I would like to thank our queen, Miss Robinson, for emailing me what you emailed me today, because I was already doing some research, and that piece that you send, my queen, that's the bonus video. All right. So I have a snippet of an article that I'm going to read to the royal family, and because I would give it all away, but it'll be in the links and everything. And again, I thank everyone that continues to donate to the channel, and I especially thank the ones that donated $1. That's greatly, because I know it's hard for us. And if you can't give that $5 a month, it's like this. If I could get 50 cents a month out of 100 people, it'll help our family. I just got family a request for someone who they don't have anything. So I'm just letting y'all know, because I've been sending out a lot of supplements, and some people do have a request of a particular supplement adding on to what we have to drink twice a day. I said I'm going to limit it again to just disinfectants and supplements. And this is going to be ongoing, my royal family. Please, you have to email me directly, because even though I do read the comments, when you email me, it's more intimate also, because we might have to converse a little bit. And I've had to do that with some people, and I don't want to do that out there before everybody's eyes, and I'm staying on code, because the enemy and their supporters, they have to go search this stuff out they damn self. So I'm gonna have those you see them there, the links are there, because I got beat up again, and I do have the Cash App, the PayPal. I even have the GoFund, but I'm not going to put that up and everything. And like I said, I have in reserve a little over $600. And in order to make sure that our family get what they need, I have to put things, have to limitate, make it a limit. So as far as, like I said, we have to drink twice a day. The ones that I been sending to y'all, don't wait till you just get totally out of your supplements or your disinfectant. Now, the disinfectant is 2 different ones I send based on availability. The disinfectant is hospital grade. And I know a lot of people have their stuff, but it's good to have at least, because one of the containers I found was a gallon of hospital grade. And you can wash your walls, clean your floor with it, and everything. And what I do with that, the one that's a gallon, I will mop my floor. Then after I mop it, I go clean my mop real good and go back over it again with that disinfectant. And don't forget that You can also pour some in a container and spray and clean your countertops or whatever. Let it sit there, and then for a little while, and then come back with a dry cloth and buff it out. Use as little. Don't try your best not to use water. And also, this is something that we have to do daily. Spray the handles and knobs on your door, outside and inside. That should be daily, because now people are going around deliberately licking on stuff, and these are the people who have it, putting it on handrails and everything. And the blessing in this, my royal family, y'all know I'm gonna give a hazmat class tomorrow, is that since folks are having to sit at home, and we got our babies and we want to have activities for them, I'm gonna do a hangout just for our royals. I found the website that somebody put together, beautiful, where it's just for our royals. It teach them how to learn the Hebrew letters. It's a lot of different things in there. So I felt like, no, that should be something special for our royals. So most likely I'm going to end up doing the hazmat class tomorrow, and then also I'll do a presentation for our royals, what I have. And there was some other links that I found, that people that homeschool their children, and it's Afrocentric. It's a beautiful guide to use. So anyway, the housekeeping is out of the way, and this is something that we all are saying over and over. I have never seen nothing like this ever in my life, and I have a deep imagination. I'm a deep thinker, like many in the royal family, and I think way out the box. And when I seen this, I said, damn, 627 people die in 24 hours. That's all I can say. What did they do to us when we was over there? Because, we built that place up, and eventually, the Moors were ran out. So, anyhow, I'm going to play this snippet of a video, and there's some deeper things I'm getting into. Now, as I'm speaking, my royal family, I was giving y'all time to go get what you need to get, because that's one of them type of videos. So here we go.
The pictures become a symbol in Italy of a system in the north of the country that is stretched to its limit. Hospital workers, nurses, doctors, the heroes of the fight against coronavirus, themselves near breaking point.
We are united, and we will fight this forsaken virus.
At a hospital in Milan, hallways and offices have been turned into makeshift intensive care units. In Brescia, tents are used to treat the sick, Rome too beefing up its capacity. When he locked down the country, the Prime Minister explained.
We live in a system in which we guarantee health and the right of everyone to be cured.
Italy's healthcare system is facing a challenge like no other. By its nature, this is an epidemic that spikes quickly and in clusters, requiring urgent and expensive treatment for some. So far, the system here has delivered free tests, intensive care, emergency treatment, all free of charge. So is Europe's often criticized public health system now showing its true strength?
To get an x-ray, somebody wants to get treatment, they can wait weeks or months for an appointment. That's the inefficiency of national health. But the plus side is that at a time of crisis, the tests for coronavirus are free for everybody. They take care of all their citizens, and there's no worrying about insurance.
So how does Italy's system stack up against America's private, profit-driven healthcare system? First, on capacity. As the crisis hits, the United States has 2.8 hospital beds per 1,000 people, fewer than Italy's 3.2 beds per 1,000 people, according to the OECD. Then, once the outbreak begins, there's the question of the response. And here, the more fragmented American model could make coordination harder.
To deal with an epidemic which affects the population globally, the response must be centralized. There must be one crisis unit that gives a unanimous response.
As infections continue to rise here at record daily rates, Italy is a country where everyone fears getting the virus, but no one need worry about being treated for it. Melissa Bell, CNN, Rome.
Okay, my royal family, let me shut that down quickly. Wow, that is heavy. So, a lot of things on mainstream media has been breaking news, and people are saying this and that and everything, and you don't know what's what. And then Trump is, doing what Trump do. He being true to his nature. And so I was listening. I was over on Democracy Now! And what I heard knocked me down. I finally heard somebody making a lot of damn sense and not trying to sugarcoat anything. So this video is 26 minutes and it's very necessary. So you can already tell that this video that I'm doing is long and deep. So I want y'all to pay close attention when they start talking about Iran, because first is Italy and then second is Iran, of people, literally, like in Italy, they literally are dropping like flies. And what y'all gonna hear is gonna be like amazing, because some people been saying some things because it started in Wuhan, and so Moab is very upset because they are hollering xenophobia and racism, and they want people to pile back up in their businesses, and I have not seen a one show any regard for people who have passed. Because I would, even their own have passed. They have not showed no compassion. But I rather for a person to stay true to their nature. You don't have to sugarcoat anything. This is what Moab and they got their supporters do too. They showing no regard, and nobody don't want to hear no damn whining when people are getting this stuff in droves globally, and you pissing and moaning about your nasty ass, fucked up ass, greasy ass, stank ass restaurant. Nobody want to hear that. And just to let you know, this country is not, I repeat, not going to bail your ass out. Because logically speaking, because them people also pride themselves on having a high IQ. Logically speaking, why would this country give you a small business loan? Ain't nobody coming in your restaurant. Might be a little few of your own trickle in. And it's more of you than anybody on this planet. So why y'all own ain't got together and say, you got to keep our business afloat. We need you to come down here every day and have your dinner. Bring your family. And it can be packed to the gills of people that reflect you. See, my royal family, when I talk about the vapors are quite revealing. And it is showing us and continuing showing us that Moab is not as united as we think. I showed that video a few days ago where in Wuhan they spitting on elevator buttons and doorknobs and people or wherever they can do it. And when this video that I'm getting ready to play, she gonna talk about how dangerous it is. Don't be having your babies touching the elevator buttons. Don't be holding on handrails. This stuff is serious. Serious. But always continue, because you don't want to mix your energy with the enemy. Continue to look at this with your spiritual eyes and ears. And the very thing that our Father gave us is discernment.
SARS-1, SARS-2, and MERS.
Hold up. Get it to the beginning. That's 3 minutes into it. And we're going to need all of this. Come on now. Now, here we go.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The worldwide death toll from the coronavirus pandemic has topped 10,000, with nearly 250,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19. Italy's death toll has now surpassed China's, where the outbreak was first reported, with over 3,400 deaths and more than 41,000 confirmed cases. In Iran, the Middle Eastern nation worst hit by coronavirus, the health ministry said the death toll has approached 1,300, with one person dying from it every 10 minutes and 50 becoming infected every hour. In Latin America, Salvador, Nicaragua reported their first confirmed cases of coronavirus. South America has nearly 1,000 confirmed infections, as Brazil, Chile, and Peru all report hundreds of confirmed cases. Venezuela has announced a nationwide quarantine. In Africa, the number of confirmed cases has risen to 700, and the head of the World Health Organization has said Africa must, quote, wake up to the coronavirus threat and prepare for the worst. In the United States, confirmed coronavirus cases have doubled over the past 2 days. New York has become the epicenter of the pandemic, with more than 5,200 confirmed cases, the highest in the nation. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom on Thursday ordered all 40 million residents to remain at home to shelter in place, effective immediately.
The virus will impact about 56% of us. You do the math in the state of California, that's a particularly large number. That number in and of itself shouldn't be overly alarming. The vast majority of us, the overwhelming majority of us, won't have symptoms, will be perfectly fine.
With over 22 million people facing infection in California over the next 8 weeks, Governor Newsom estimated the state's hospital capacity has 20,000 fewer beds than will be needed at the peak of the pandemic. For more, we go to California, where we're joined by Dr. Michelle Barry, Director of the Center for Innovation and Global Health at Stanford University, incoming chair for the Consortium of Universities for Global Health. Dr. Barry is also the past president of the American Society of Tropical Medicine. She's joining us from her home as California is under a shelter-in-place order. Dr. Barry, thank you so much for joining us. Before we start on the global picture, if you could just simply explain, people say coronavirus, people say COVID-19, explain where that term COVID-19 came from, what it means, and then the class of coronavirus viruses, what that means as well.
Well, good morning and thank you. The name coronavirus comes from a series of viruses that are found in bats. There are about 1,300 species of bats, and at any one time there are about 6 to 8 coronaviruses that are circulating in bats. So there are many different species of bats. There are only 7 species that have been known to infect man so far. 4 of which we all know very well. They cause the common cold. And there are 3 that are more deadly. SARS-1, SARS-2, and MERS. The term corona comes from the...
Let me stop that just for a second. Now, this woman is breaking this stuff down. because Moab want to distance theyself away from this. And in fact, I was over on they got a channel where they show that hospital that they build in so many days, and it's a lot of people making comments. And this one girl said in there, I eat bat soup almost every day. All right, and that word wet market, it just sounds nasty to me, because in them wet markets they bring scavengers literally out of the ocean, and a lot of that stuff, because of Fukushima, is filled with tons of radiation. And I like the fact that she did not sugarcoat anything. And I may interject a little bit in this, because there's some stuff in here is just eye-opening as we continue on.
Halo that is seen around the virus with the spikes that come out of the coronavirus when you look at it under electron microscopy.
And COVID-19 means?
It's a term that actually most people are. It's a coronavirus disease, and it happened in the year 19. Some people use the word novel in front of it, but it is synonymous with what is called SARS-2, severe acute respiratory syndrome, and it's the second such coronavirus that we've seen that causes severe acute respiratory disease.
So let's talk about where this pandemic is hitting hardest. In our headlines, we just talked about Italy surpassing China. Why don't you take us really on a tour of the world? How has this happened? Why is Italy the epicenter, Europe itself the epicenter, and also Iran so hard hit at this point? How did this all unfold?
Well, it's an interesting story. And I'm going to step back and take a larger picture about it, because I'm very interested in One Health and climate and planetary health. And I know we're all obsessed about this virus, but I think we have to think about what some of the activities that have happened in this Anthropocene, where men have impacted the planet. We have changed the ecology of how we live with animals. So that if you look at most of the emerging viruses and the emerging diseases that have happened over the last 100 years, they've been what we call zoonoses. And zoonoses are spillover from animals. This particular coronavirus was noted first in a seafood market in Hunan, and it has to do with the fact that they're probably, even though this is a bat coronavirus, we do not know whether there's an amplifier animal in SARS-1, which also started in a seafood market in an area in China. It's the intimate living with humans and animals and spillover. In SARS-1, it was probably a civet cat that was being sold. For a while, SARS-2, this particular virus was thought to be an amplifier with a pangolin, a highly trafficked animal. We know now that that's probably not true, and we don't know exactly how it actually began in the seafood market. But I want to bring us back to this idea that we need to be doing better surveillance in our animals and doing a better job with our planet. The large Nipah virus epidemic had a lot to do with deforestation and movement of bats closer to other animals, and another novel virus emerged. So I want to bring people back to some of the larger issues when we think about these emerging viruses that happen in the world.
And a connection to climate change, to the climate crisis?
Yeah, well, that is important. Climate change, deforestation, and changing ecology is crucial for how we have animal and human ecology change. For instance, we saw the Zika outbreak happen several years ago in northeast Brazil. There's been a lot of interesting discussion how deforestation may have played a role in that, and higher temperatures may have played a role in changing vectors, mosquito vectors in that role. Mosquitoes play no role in SARS, don't worry. But it's a very important question that I think when this all quiets down, we're sort of in the thick of this epidemic, I think we need to pay more attention to this concept of what I'm calling human and planetary health. We're actually trying to try to build a new Center for Human and Planetary Health at Stanford. We're working on a new postdoctoral fellowship for scientists to actually study this human ecology change.
We're going to break, and then we want you to take us from Italy to China to Iran. We want to look at Africa, which you've called a ticking time bomb, and Latin America, Asia. Dr. Michelle Barry, Director of the Center for Innovation and Global Health at Stanford University. She's an infectious disease doctor. Stay with us. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The worldwide death toll from the coronavirus pandemic has topped 10,000, with nearly 250,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19. Our guest is Dr. Michelle Barry, Center of the for the Innovation in Global Health at Stanford University. She's an infectious disease doctor herself. So take us on a tour, but begin with, we just played this magnificent music of a quarantined opera singer singing out to his community. Quarantine, what does that word mean, Dr. Barry?
So that's an interesting, I think there's a lot of different understanding of what isolation and quarantine is. The word quarantine actually is an Italian word that comes from the word quaranta, or 40 days, and those were the amount of days that a ship actually had to stay in port before being released into Venice when the Black Plague was occurring. So it actually comes from that word during the Black Death. When we think about quarantine and the difference between quarantine and isolation, isolation is when one has a sick person and you isolate them, whereas quarantine is if you've had contact with a person, you need to stay at home and minimize contact with family, with other people other than your family for 14 days.
So let's talk about Italy. Why is it the epicenter right now? Why has Italy become the epicenter? It's surpassed China, and it has a link to China.
I'm sorry?
It surpassed China, and it has a link to China. What is the connection? Why has it been hit so hard, and then compare it to South Korea?
Yeah, I think what South Korea, I can't comment upon why Italy has been hit so hard. We can only speculate, and I don't want to say anything because I have a lot of Italian colleagues that are working incredibly hard to stave this epidemic. Most of us feel that they got behind the curve, and behind the curve is we really have no vaccine or effective treatment yet for this virus. What we do have is what we call non-pharmaceutical interventions. And that is basically quarantine and isolation and good, transparent communication and testing and surveillance. And I think what South Korea and what Taiwan and what Singapore did that have made such a huge difference is that they did early testing, early surveillance, they quarantined people who had contacts and isolated those that were sick. It's clear when you look at the Chinese numbers, and what Wuhan did was pretty amazing. They did very aggressive isolation and quarantine, whereas the Italians, and one can say it has to do with measures that are taken in not only a governmental, and you can argue about whether the Chinese were draconian, but they were very effective. You can talk about different kinds of cultures, how accepted it is to isolate yourself and wear masks. But whatever it was, Italy started behind the curve. I think we in California, we're trying to be as aggressive as we can. We're very early, and particularly in my county, which was an early epicenter, Santa Clara County. I have to give kudos to Sarah Cody, who's our public health commissioner. She did early shelter in home. So I think these non-pharmaceutical interventions are really important. And then, and this is more up your show, I think we need very strong central coordination. If you read a paper written by Jason Wang in JAMA, where he describes the early Taiwan approach, it was because there was strong central coordination. They had the ministers of labor, the ministers of education, the ministers of transportation, all working together to give daily communication and not misinformation out there.
And is there a connection between particularly northern Italy and China, population movements? I mean, also, the whole supply chain, companies that are in China but serving populations in Italy, the United States, etc.
The amount of manpower that went into stopping the transmission in China was amazing. They sent 40,000 doctors to the Wuhan area. They had thousands of epidemiologists, so that teams of epidemiologists with 5 to a team would actually do contact tracing for one person. I don't think Italy has that manpower. And we certainly know that they don't have the manpower now with their doctors or nurses. And many of us in the U.S. are very worried about overwhelming our hospital systems. I think you've heard a lot of discussion recently about flattening the curve. And what does that mean, flattening the curve? It doesn't mean necessarily curing the disease. What it does is help not overwhelm our hospital system, which is what we're all worried about. Already we're worried about having enough nasopharyngeal swabs to do testing. We are way behind in our testing. If you look at South Korea, they did 5,000 tests per million people. We're not even up to 100 testing per million people.
How did that happen, Dr. Barry? How did this happen? The U.S. is supposed to be the leader in the world. Was this a combination of President Trump's anti-science approach and his nationalist approach, xenophobic approach? Didn't the World Health Organization have a test that all of these countries have used that the U.S. rejected, the CDC then put out its own, and it was flawed?
I can't comment on that because I wasn't involved in that decision, but certainly it is really a travesty that we don't have enough tests and that we're not testing aggressively. It did not help to have a president that doesn't believe in science. Actually, early on, called this all a hoax. It really helps when a president believes in science and evidence-based science. So yes, that is disturbing, but I can't comment on what the machinations were. Our CDC is working very hard. Many of my colleagues are working around the clock trying to stave this off. But one of the things about epidemics is it's really important to have what I call shared global governance. And I don't think in this world it's great that we don't have a stronger central governance of our world health. We have a World Health Organization that has a budget that is less than many of our hospitals in the United States. We even in the United States here, our par excellence group, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, is not allowed to come into a state unless it's invited by the state. We have a legacy of federalism where the states are really the forefront of public health. And even within the state of California, our county has different recommendations than the next county over. So each of our counties are making decisions. I think what is so amazingly powerful by some of the countries that have been able to contain this, like Singapore, Taiwan, and China, has been central coordination. You may argue that some have been very draconian, but then when you have a small little country like Taiwan that abuts China and was able to do it with central command, and I actually visited the central command station in Taiwan about 2 years ago. It's very impressive. They set that up. Now, admittedly, those countries that have done very well, Amy, and people haven't talked about this, they have had the experience of SARS-1. So they were set up. For instance, there were fever clinics set up where if people had fever, they were immediately transferred to these clinics. They had ability to build hospitals rapidly, which we have not had that ability. They were able to isolate sick people and not put them necessarily back into family units. If you look at the China data, most of the transmission drive was in family clusters. It wasn't necessarily in nursing homes or schools, which is where we usually think the drive for these clusters are. Actually, the majority of the clustering of illnesses were in the family. So isolating sick people becomes very key. And we have a problem in this country with our homeless. I was talking to our county official, our public health official, and she's really working endlessly to try to buy up hotels, buy RVs, try to figure out how to isolate our homeless population.
Oh, I still got quite a few.
To not get COVID-19.
Yes, yes.
So what happened in Iran?
Iran was the perfect storm of, and let's talk a little bit about that also, but it was the perfect storm of religion and politics and public health. And this had to do with the fact, because it's kind of an interesting, why would you think Iran, and I don't know, I have a slide with the curves, if that could come up, of how fast that curve went up. And you might wonder why it is that Iran sort of exploded. Well, it had to do with the fact that they have a very holy shrine in the town of Qom. And what happened, according to my Iranian colleagues that I've been talking to, is that there was a group of 700 Chinese pilgrims that were there from the Hubei province. And part of the how one gives homage to this shrine is by kissing it or licking it. So you can imagine how that was a very easy way to immediately disseminate it. My understanding from my Iranian colleagues also, it's been very hard to actually even barricade this shrine off currently, even in the midst of this epidemic. And we've seen how religion has also played a role in South Korea. The earliest cluster was in a church where you have large gatherings of people. And even in New York City, and please correct me, but I've been following your epidemic as well, that there's been a real problem in the early Orthodox Jewish population where that outbreak in the Hasidic population has occurred.
So,
yeah.
Right now, it's just exploding in Iran. And then I want you to talk about Africa, which you've called a ticking time bomb.
Yeah. I think there are two ticking time bombs that I'm worried about, not only Africa, but India, because we haven't heard a lot about India, and that's over 1 billion people that are very closely geographic space. But the time bomb in Africa is really about healthcare capacity. I spend a lot of time working in sub-Saharan Africa, and we're all extremely worried about it. We're starting to see it take off. In South Africa, the issue about why it's a ticking bomb is, again, it has to do with surveillance and the lack of ability to test. The last numbers, and I may be a little outdated because I'm thinking 40, it's like a fire hose. We're all watching these numbers. But the last numbers I looked at were that there were only 40 out of 54 countries that were able to do testing for COVID-19 or SARS.
And
SARS too. And
go ahead.
It's not the only coronavirus we're going to see. Unless we pay attention, I'm really going to come down hard on this concept of One Health, keeping an eye on the intersection of our animals, our environment, and our human health, are we going to get ahead of the ball for epidemics? Because this is not the big one. I mean, we think we're living in the big one. The big one is really a pandemic flu, which is airborne and not droplet-borne.
And that you talk about airborne, not droplet-borne. What does that mean? And is the coronavirus not only an issue of someone coughing or sneezing or getting droplets on another person, but this whole question of what does it mean to be aerosolized?
Mm-hmm. So, yes, SARS-2 can be aerosolized if you are doing a procedure which vigorously causes massive aerosolation, like when you intubate somebody. This is why healthcare workers, and there were 4,000 healthcare workers in China that actually got infected. The lovely thing about infecting young people is that there's a much smaller, even though it's really important to think about the young people, the mortality rate in young people is much lower. But let's go back to this question of aerosolizing. So this has to do with the size of the droplets and how they're actually suspended in air. The size of the droplets for SARS-2 or COVID-19 are larger droplets, and they fall way within 6 feet, which is why we have these 6-foot distance that we're asking people to stay away from. Although healthcare workers are at much higher risk when they do aerosolizing procedures. And so we need to be careful about that. In SARS-1, actually one of the earliest disseminations was through fecal dissemination in the early residential building in Hong Kong, where there was a problem in the toilet. And we all know that SARS-1 and 2
and you're talking about SARS-2 is COVID-19?
COVID-19 is SARS-2.
It's coronavirus.
Yeah, see, most of us are using SARS-1 and SARS-2, but for this purpose, I'll use COVID-19. COVID-19 is fecally excreted, but there have not been, first of all, diarrhea is not a major manifestation in that. But what I was talking about in the first epidemic with SARS-1, not COVID-19, there was fecal dissemination when there was a toilet that malfunctioned and aerosolized feces. So yes, there is potential for aerosolization, but it's only with unique procedures that happens.
So we have to break, but we're asking to talk to you at the top of the hour, and then we're going to post part 2 online, an incredible tutorial as we look at what's happening in the world and also how coronavirus is transmitted with Dr. Michelle Barry, Director of the Center for Innovation and Global Health at Stanford University, incoming chair for the Consortium of Universities for Global Health. Dr. Barry is also the past president of the American Society of Tropical Medicine. Go to democracynow.org for part 2. When we come back, solidarity, not charity.
That was quite powerful, my royal family. Quite powerful. So, we're going to get into something much deeper, and this is the bonus video. But before we get into the bonus video, I'm going to show y'all a little something here. Right there. See that? Right there. Let me break this down to the royal family. And like I said, I'm only reading a snippet of this article because I would give away what we all getting ready to get hit with. And again, I thank you, Miss Robinson, my queen. So let me read this real quick. Okay. So, back in, let me check that date. Back in October 18th, 2019, in New York, let me put this back, experts simulated a coronavirus pandemic last year, and it killed 60,000 65 million. Again, experts simulated a coronavirus pandemic last year, and it killed 65 million. Last October, 2 months before the coronavirus that caused COVID-19 emerged in central China, a group of public health experts gathered in New York City for a simulation. Their objective was to determine how industries, national governments, and international institutions could work together to respond to the hypothetical pandemic with potentially catastrophic consequences. Are y'all getting that? One little part, the last little part I'm gonna read. Such a pandemic is no longer just hypothetical. This week, the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention said it's preparing for a coronavirus pandemic. And the organization, former director, flatly declared that COVID-19 will become a pandemic. Now, isn't that ironic? Man, oh man. I'm telling you, Queen Miss Robinson, thank you. And we gonna watch this video. Now keep it, okay, it's called Event 201, a global pandemic exercise. And I'm gonna reveal some more stuff a little bit later. So, this video is 11 minutes, a little over 11 minutes.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. Experts agree, unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic. The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society.
We could be looking at double the number of cases in 1 week and 16 times as many in a month if we are not able to stop the spread. That would be on the order of 500,000 cases, and it would continue to rise exponentially. In 3 months, we could be approaching 10 million cases.
We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
We have known about caps-like viruses in animals and people for decades, but have not been successful at developing a licensed vaccine. And sure, there are new technologies that may help, but it's going to be difficult. I am not optimistic about having a vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic.
So the policy crisis in question for this board in this meeting is this: how should governments, business, and international organizations allocate and distribute pandemic antivirals and medical supplies to the people who need them most?
What we've seen work very well in the HIV field is, in fact, procurement through the Global Fund. So having a centralized mechanism, so financially able to procure on behalf of affected countries would be critical. I think the second thing is it's going to be very important that for the business sector, for manufacturers of antivirals, that we have clarity around what the need is and where the need is and who are making the decisions.
I think that given that the countries most affected are those that are low and middle income countries with unequal access to technology, to finances, the UN has a worldwide footprint, universally recognized, and universal membership.
A global stockpile would certainly help ensure more rational and strategic allocation, but the reality is that we don't have the logistics capability, even within the UN, to bring that together in one place and run it. So this is where I think a collaboration between the international organizations like the World Health Organization and the private sector, which runs these supply chains for many purposes every day, understand where the supplies are, make smart decisions about how to allocate them to the people who need them in the places that need them the most, and then work with the industry to move those supplies from where they are today to where they need to be.
Just to underscore the point that cooperation among supply chain providers or businesses that have huge supply chains can add a lot of efficiency to the whole process.
The question is, can you, through this international mechanism, really promote commitments to doing this as quickly as possible and give people a sense that actually if they contribute more, that they will have a better chance of protecting their own populations and their country's security and health.
So to be completely clear, most of this production would already be committed in contracts.
Yes.
It is almost unheard of that people are producing product without having a forward commitment for the consumption of that product. So the first thing that needs to be done, because this is not something that the countries currently control, unless countries are going to bring about emergency situations and co-opt an existing supply chain.
I think it's not likely, I agree, that countries are not going to buy countermeasure to put into a global supply without retaining a large portion of it for themselves.
Public health agencies have issued travel advisories, while some countries have banned travel from the worst affected areas. As a result, the travel sector is taking a huge hit. Travel bookings are down 45% and many flights have been canceled. A ripple effect is racing through the service sector. Governments that rely on travel and tourism as a large part of their economies are being hit particularly hard.
How should national leaders, businesses, and international organizations balance the risk of worsening disease that would be caused by the continued movement of people around the world against the risks of profound economic consequence of travel and trade bans?
If there's some sense that there's a UN institution that can do all of this, then I worry we're suffering from a delusional disorder on the power of the UN. It's really important to get those industries and their trade associations and an efficient leadership established, which is decentralized, but has a collective responsibility and accountability. And that needs to be supported by the public leadership.
What is essential, what is non-essential travel, we have to clarify this. Otherwise, if we go down to 20% bookings over a long period, the company will run down. That's a fact.
You know, there's a whole complex set of issues in a highly interdependent world on supply chains that are just in time. We need to think about how much flex there is in that just-in-time supply chain system and make sure it keeps running. I think it's going to take specificity, and it's going to take knowledge that only the private sector has. The UN can play an important coordinating facilitation role, but the companies know where those commodities are, where they move, how to move them, and that's where a type of public-private collaboration that we have not generally had in these crises needs to be put together pretty quickly.
We are not out of money, yet. But the fact is we are trending in a dangerous direction and something needs to change.
So the policy question for this board now is, how should financial resources be prioritized? Are there nodes that we cannot allow to fail? What is your sense of priorities? We don't have money to pay for all of these urgent problems.
So at the moment, we want the funds, right? You need the money. So where's the money? So government kind of supplies some money. A lot of, private sectors, some are sitting here, you have some money. But now you need a really coordinated, centralized efforts.
Hotels will be experiencing, crippling losses doing that. And we know that the hotel business in itself makes up 5% of the GDP.
Governments need to be willing to do things that are out of their historical perspective or for the most part, it's really a war footing that we need to be on.
We shouldn't underestimate the power of entrepreneurship. We need to escalate that, whether it's through the government's helping with tax breaks or subsidies of that nature to increase manufacturing of those types of products. It can happen quickly. A Marshall type plan, don't mean to say that exactly, but a Marshall plan that can go into effect can stimulate change very quickly.
Countries are reacting in different ways as to how best to manage the overwhelming amounts of and misinformation circulating over the internet. In some cases, limited internet shutdowns are being implemented to quell panic.
How much control of information should there be, and by whom? And how can false information be effectively challenged? And what if that false information is coming from companies or from governments?
I think it's very important that we make sure that there is concise communication with all healthcare facilities where these patients are being treated so that there isn't mass panic.
We're at a moment where the social media platforms have to step forward and recognize the moment to assert that they're a technology platform and not a broadcaster is over. They in fact have to be a participant in broadcasting accurate information and partnering with the scientific and health communities to counterweight, if not flood the zone of accurate information, because to put the genie back in the bottle of the misinformation and disinformation is nigh impossible.
One thing we haven't spoken about, and I'm wondering whether it's time to talk about this, is a step up from the part of the governments on enforcement actions against fake news.
I personally do not believe that trying to shut things down in terms of information is either practical or desirable. And we do have, I think, a couple of strategies that are available to us, one of which is the flood strategy, second of which is relying and informing and equipping trusted sources of information with the facts so they can then pass that on. But we also need to actually think about a technological answer to this.
The outcome of the CAPS pandemic in Event 201 was catastrophic. 65 million people died in the first 18 months. The outbreak was small at first and initially seemed controllable, but then it started spreading in densely crowded and impoverished neighborhoods of megacities. From that point on, the spread of the disease was explosive. Within 6 months, cases were occurring in nearly every country. The global economy was in a free fall. The GDP down 11%. Stock markets around the world plummeted between 20 and 40% and headed into a downward cycle of fear and low expectation. Businesses were not borrowing, banks were not lending. Everyone was just hoping to hunker down and weather the storm. Economists say the economic turmoil caused by such a pandemic will last for years, perhaps a decade. The societal impacts, the loss of faith in government, the distrust of news, and the breakdown of social cohesion could last even longer. We have to ask, did this need to be so bad? Are there things we could have done in the 5 to 10 years leading up to the pandemic that would have lessened the catastrophic consequences? We believe the answer is yes. So, are we as a global community now finally ready to do the hard work needed to prepare for the next pandemic?
Wow. Isn't that deep, my royal family? That was deep, deep, deep. And so they went and had this, let me see, is this the one? They went and had their little, convention, and people are talking about the things that the experts, unquote, would happen when a pandemic hit. What did they do after the fact? Now, I did find out from Lisa that they did reach out to Trump, and he wasn't interested at all. At all. At all. Think about that. They did this because, in December? That's when I first heard about Corona, somewhere around December. And so basically they had, this is how I look at it. many of y'all know that I'm a welder, and sometimes the architects or the superintendents would come out and see what we were doing, and on the blueprints, they would bring the blueprints, and they would be like, well, why you didn't follow it the way to the blueprints? And I was like, well, on a piece of paper, when you're, laying everything out, the specs and everything, you can control that and pencil it in and out. But once you get in the field, that's when we have to modify. We're going to have to adapt, basically, to our environment. So, yes, they in here making all these predictions. They in a swanky hotel or convention center or wherever they at, nice meals and drinks and everything. And, and they're reading their paperwork, and, they're even boasting. And, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I have all these credentials, and I went to all these schools. You might have to listen to that a whole day before they even get into the ingredients of it, so to speak. So, yeah, you can say that, but there was supposed to be action with it. That's why I don't like when that we shall overcome shit, where we pissed off what they continue to do to us, and then we gonna go march. And what's the plan after that? So now it's here, and it is exposed. America, Lady Liberty, your panty draws didn't hit your ankles long ago. The elastic that was holding them panty draws up, you stretched it to the limit. And it's always the extreme with them. They like to speak hypothetically. They ain't into reality. And then they quick, because I've heard stuff like this, to talk about how it's going to hit the impoverished communities. I'm a bit of a history buff. Any pandemic they have ever had, let's talk about the bubonic plague, the Black Death, they have many names for it. It touched as many in them nasty, stank-ass castles, opposed to what they would call peasants. It was equal. So, like, if you got 1,000, unquote, peasants and 1,000 fake royals that interbreed running in the castles and stuff, maybe out of that, 600 gonna die away from the castle, and 600 gonna die within. They were just as filthy, because when they would die and strip their clothes, it ain't unusual to see them with fleas all over them, because that would cause the bubonic plague, fleas. And then you have atrocious hygiene, or whatever you want to call hygiene habits. So what they're basically saying is that basically when you live in the hood, that the hood just gonna be so nasty from outside to inside. That ain't true. I got family living hood. House is clean. They don't play that shit. I don't like when they do that type of stuff. But anyway, as we continue on, I got some links here, and there's a number of videos there that you can watch this entire thing. And wow, lo and behold, Bill and Melinda Gates. Bill, and I looked it up, owns that patent to the human coronavirus. Oh yes, I know some of y'all didn't look it up. Some people's talking about that stuff ain't real, and he done made them old funny type of moves and everything. Oh, here it is. So, 201. I wanted to find out what that meant in the word. So I went over here and I couldn't find 201, but I did find 200. The symbolic meaning of 200 in the Bible is that of insufficiency. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Ain't that something? this teaches the insufficiency of money to save someone from the consequences of sin. It's close enough, ain't it, my royal family? That's like when I was looking at the symbolic meaning in the word only of the number 19, because we see Covet 19. And it says here, donates Yahweh's perfect order in regard to his judgment in the Bible. Then I jumped down and it said here, where is that other meaning? They said, what does the number 19 in relations to Israel? The United Kingdom split in two pieces after the death of Solomon. The pieces referred to as Israel are the northern 10 tribes. That's deep. That's deep. So there's a lot of division going on in the world. That's how I look at it, you know. And you get on there and start watching mainstream, breaking news. People is all over the place. They scared. They want to throw something at it. Trump is braggadocious. He's still on on that bullshit that he be pulling, you know. So as we continue on here, where is that? Let me go back here. So let me click this. So I'm going to also send this whole link here, and I found all of the videos, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of their summit. And let me go over here to their site. How many did they have here? 1, let me see, all the way. They have 5. So you may want to watch it at your leisure. But isn't that ironic, my royal family? That's a hell of a bonus video to me. So all we can do, like I often say, don't make hasty decisions, and slow down. Hold on to your money as much as possible, because this is going to be an ongoing thing. Sit down with your family, and if somebody in your family happen to get it, what y'all going to do? You know, because there are people getting it. Because I seen a brother who got it, and they interviewed him on CNN, and they asked him how he was doing. He said he feel fine. He's just quarantining, and he seemed to be very healthy. So it's all about our diets. We need to eat food that will keep our nutritional level up and our immunities build up, and reduce refined sugars as much as possible. Eating them damn junk foods and McDonald's and cookies and all that crap. If you want some fruit, if you want some sweets, our Father put a variety of fruit here. That's your candy, straight up. Because I eat a lot of it. I'll walk past some cakes and cookies and go, well, no, I take that back. I ain't going to walk past no good ass homemade sweet potato pie. You know, we all got our weakness. I'll have to do a little intermission on that. But, don't overindulge. And we at home with a lot of us are at home with our royals. And some of them be kind of funny about the vegetables. Have them to make a smoothie with you. And, you want to put, the green stuff. Years ago, I heard somebody said, throw an apple in it and it'll kill all the taste of the vegetables and have a sweeter taste, and they love it. But when our children are hands-on, you can set up an assembly line, because I used to do that with my youngest son. We would go to the farmer's market, get everything we need for the smoothies, chop it all up, put it in individual bags, and then we would just scoop out what we need. I did it like how you can go to Jumbo Juice. They damn near charge you $10 for a 32-ounce smoothie. You can make that stuff at home. We can make toothpaste, which I have. We can make deodorant, which I'm going to learn how. Mouthwash. Lisa, she's selling her soap. So there's blessings in a lot of this. Don't be frustrated. Don't take on the energy of the enemy and the enemy supporters, because what we are looking at, my royal family, we're literally watching a kingdom fall before our eyes. They've been in power here in America 243 years. Do you think they're going to make 250? So, one thing that I'm learning about this, be proactive with your family. Set up short-term goals and long-term goals. What we will do if, because there's more going to come, get crazier, where how you can survive in your car, survive in your house. And that's where my expertise come in. I don't know what time I'm going to do it Sunday, but again, I will be giving a hazmat training class, but I'm going to modify it because we're not in the construction field. How to survive at home, how to survive in your car. It's going to be a lot of different things that come with that. So that's about it, my royal family. So render your voice with your beautiful divine words. And as always, my royal family, I thank you for your love. I thank you for your support. And with that said, Ashe.